So I know some of you are dealing with a new diagnosis and you're fearful and there's frightening things going on in your world right now. But I've watched Linda Lynch and I've watched Stacy in particular come through this and come out the other side with young adults in their lives that are capable, happy, accomplished, and just wonderful people to be around.
Yeah.
So I love those kids. And I've seen a lot of the Matty Fun kids over the last 10 years go from being sort of fragile with the bubble wrap and the whole thing to running and playing and having the best time and feeling really confident in themselves. So whatever road you're on right now, just realize that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You will get there, and it's not going to be sunshine and roses every day, but you're going to get there and you're going to be strong and you're going to be a wiser person for it being at the other end. This is not the road any of you planned on. You did end up in Holland when you were supposed to be in Italy, but there's something to be said for this journey too. That being said, I wanted to talk a little bit about navigating the educational support teams. And Stacy kind of covered a lot of this, and I just thought I would kind of flesh out some of those definitions. Because when you do walk into school, and I know for some of you this is new, when you walk into school and people are slinging all of those acronyms everywhere, there's letters and numbers and form numbers, and every district has a different thing, it's daunting. Okay? And I know, I sit there at the team table, I'm a school psychologist in Providence, and I've been doing this for years, and every year I get another handful of forms and say, okay, well, you need to do these at the meeting too. And I'm thinking, you want me to sling any more paper at these people? They're dealing with a child with a disability as it is. And I got to have you sign off on the Medicare form and sign the IEP and sign permission for this test. And, oh, do we do, extended school year? So you get these mountains of papers. So one of the things I have to tell you is that find your point person at the school that's going to help you navigate all those letters and numbers and acronyms. I'm a school psychologist, and sometimes I'm the point person if you're looking for special services for your child, or if you're just looking for a little moral support, that might be the person you look for. But when you have an educational team for one purpose or another, your teacher's going to be part of it, you're going to be part of it, your child may be part of it if they're 14, or as Stacy said, sometimes you bring them in sooner. You're probably going to have the nurse. You need an administrator, one sort or another. Psychologist, of course, potentially. You may have a guidance counselor if you're dealing with middle or high school. And you may have a special educator, and there may be other service professionals as well. If your child has speech and language delays, whether they're, sometimes it's a chicken or the egg thing when it comes to epilepsy. Sometimes the epilepsy is part of the cause, and sometimes it's just another symptom of a bigger syndrome that may be going on. But you may have a speech pathologist, you may even have an occupational or physical therapist, depending on what kinds of needs your child has. Okay? To access the team, your first point person is probably the nurse. The school nurse is because you're dealing with a medical issue as a part of your child's need base. The nurse may be your first person, but you may also talk to the administrator or your child's teacher directly. But anybody on the team, any specialist in there, if you say, I really need some guidance here, my child has XYZ issues, I need to talk to somebody. My first thought is your teacher, your administrator, your nurse. Your psychologist can help you. A lot of schools also have a school social worker. By law, there has to be one somewhere in the district, but they might not be present all the time. So that's your team. Access the team by talking to any one of them. But not just talk. My other recommendation to you is, just as Dr. Sharif was saying, you got paper from your doctor, you've got neurologist appointments, pediatric records, any of those things that help define what's going on with your child. Bring them with you to school, sit down with the principal or the nurse or the psychologist and say, listen, my child has some stuff going on and they're going to need a lot of support. This is new to us. We're really worried and we're really scared. We need some support. Let them take those precious papers and check through them and say, you know what, we need to have a meeting. And that's what will happen next. But if you write down your concerns, bring your paper with you, and talk to the correct person, that should open up that door for you to meet with the right people to support your kid in school. Your nurses, again, I keep going back to the nurse, but our school nurses are incredibly valuable to us when we have a child with a lot of health concerns. And there are some academic versus medical accommodations, and that's the next step, okay? The next step is that you're looking at what your child may need. We have some kids who have, I'm thinking of some children who right now maybe just need some accommodations in their day because they don't have frequent seizures, but when they do, they need a quiet place. They need to rest. They need to sit in the nurse's office for a half an hour or so because they've had a seizure and they're kind of logy afterwards and they need something to deal with the fatigue. They may develop a migraine and they may need to go to the nurse to take their medicine because you can't carry your Imitrex around in your hand. Under those circumstances, we have a plan that comes under the Rehabilitation Act of '73. And I only included the definitions because we throw Section 504. He has a 504 plan around. A 504 plan is an anti-discrimination plan. Your child is treated like any other child. And if he needs to go and rest somewhere, that's an accommodation he needs to access the rest of life as a person. Okay? As adequately as the needs of the non-disabled are met. Just means we accommodate your child in a way that makes sure that he's not discriminated against because he has a disability or she has a disability. Okay? So that's a 504. It is an accommodation plan. It helps you access all that normal stuff that everybody gets. So the other piece is that if your child has more underlying learning disabilities or learning delays that are also getting in the way because of the epilepsy or because there's an overarching syndrome, then you want to really look at whether they qualify as a child with a disability that requires an IEP. Okay? So if you're a child who qualifies for IEP services, they're identified. This child has an other health impairment. Your child has a learning disability. Your child has multiple disabilities. Your child has ADHD. But it really comes under a disabling condition. So there is a label attached to that. But that qualifies them for specialized instruction. And that is the key in an IEP, that they will need specialized instruction as well as other kinds of accommodations. So this goes a little further with an IEP. The IEP is a little deeper, a little wider. There's a lot more regulation to it. The 504 is a little simpler, a little basic. It requires far less paper. We take an IEP, really, this is where you get into all the legal paperwork where you're signing off that it's okay to do this and it's okay to test that and it's all right to collect this piece of data. And so that's when you get those mounds of paper that start, coming up to your chin. You have, in a 504 or an IEP, there are probably a bunch of accommodations your child will need. Okay? Stacey already addressed a lot of these things. What does the health care plan for your child look like? Who's responsible for making sure your child is monitored during recess? Who's making sure that that the teacher is collecting data? Is the principal aware? How does the sub get notified? It answers a lot of those questions in any one of those plans. Because teachers get sick, somebody's out. Is it in the substitute's paperwork that, oh, you have a child in your room that you need to just keep an eye, a little extra eye on, make sure they're okay during the day? To provide rest time and academic consideration if the child has a seizure. And provide an alternate place free of distractions, because they may need to take their test in a separate location because maybe their medication interferes with their ability to concentrate. So they may need to go into the resource room to take standardized assessments or the math test, or, you know, God forbid, you have to take a chemistry test in a room full of people where somebody's sneezing every 5 minutes or there's something else going on. These things also provide for education for peers and staff, and plan for an academic makeup so the individual can catch up if they have to be out. These are the ways that we make sure that all of those needs and all of those questions are answered. There are a lot of things that your child may need to have addressed, and there are people in the school that can address these needs. You want to develop appropriate goals. You want to be able to adapt, so you need to know that if you have an IEP, that if a month later, after you've written that IEP, something has changed. The nature of the seizure has changed. Your child may need to be out for a while, that they've lost a skill for some reason, that they were talking really adequately and now there's a problem with their articulation. Then you can come back to the table at any time and readdress the goals in your IEP to switch them up if you need to. Okay? If there are fluctuations in attention, memory, anxiety, those are things you can accommodate in the IEP. Those are things that can also be accommodated in a 504. But also, when your child's needs change, there's all kinds of stuff going on. They need some access on and off to some sort of counseling. I think when kids are in that sort of school age where they're, I don't know, I'm thinking when they get to be about 9, 10, 11, they get into that tween age. Then they start negotiating the social piece of being a little bit different in some way or another, and it's sometimes difficult. So working on social skills, working on mood changes and how to cope with that in school, those are things you can have written into the IEP. So, or sought after through 504 if need be. Access to the school psychologist periodically for a check-in. Those are things that are easy to fix. Okay? They may want to tell you that it's not, but you can really sit down at the table and say, this is what I need. Again, we know that there are sometimes coping skills that kids need in school. You want to go back over those. You want to educate classmates. You may have the child say, my child wants to have some friends, but is not really sure how to go about that. Maybe the psychologist can organize a social skills group that can help these kids with friendship skills altogether. We do that a lot because there's a lot of kids. It's not just your child that is having trouble making friends. It may be somebody else's child too. These are Stacy's lines and words. You're your child's best advocate at school and at home. And you need to stay healthy and positive. You need to recruit your support network to help you meet your own needs so you can meet the medical and emotional needs of your child. And I think this is the same theme that came through the whole thing, that it's a partnership with your school, with your other parents, with your doctor. We're all in partnership to help your child, and never forget that that's what it's about, that we're all working together. And we want to support your kids. We want your child to do well. You may come into those meetings and we look all scary and intimidating sometimes, but we really do care. So we're drowning in paper too. But at the heart of all of that is that we want to help your child. So if we can, we will. There's a lot more than I can say, but I think I'm going to just get repetitive for you. So if we have specific questions, we'll talk about it after we're done. I did make up, a little list of resources. They're kind of in yellow at the moment, sort of green actually. But this will be available on the website of Portage to George. So these are, I tried to get specific because a lot of these websites have tons of information and you don't even know where you're clicking anymore. So, because I had to go through and I'm experienced with the jargon of education. And I still had to poke through and figure out which one of these pieces I needed. So I wanted to give you a place to get started. And if I run across any further ones, I'll forward them to George and to Deb and Rick, and I will, through the Matty Fund, be a resource to you if you care to ask other questions that you don't care to ask in this forum. So, thank you all very much.